Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When you need information about hospice, Hospice Navigation Services can help. Our team of experienced hospice navigators is here to offer one-on-one consulting sessions by phone or video. You can book a complimentary 30-minute session when you need general information, or book a 60-minute session when you have in-depth questions or need to troubleshoot your current hospice care. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. Visit theheartofhospice.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today. This episode is sponsored by GrandPad. GrandPad is the all-in-one tablet designed especially for senior adults. With GrandPad, you get safe, simple video calling and photo sharing. Users can create a private family network that allows for secure photo and video sharing. The GrandPad utilizes a simple format that allows seniors to enjoy games, music, email, and more. Visit our special GrandPad website designed exclusively for the Heart of Hospice listeners at grandpad.net/THOH.
My guest, Christy Yates, works with ALS authors to educate and support dementia and Alzheimer's caregivers with a special focus on sandwich caregiving. Christy Yates is a licensed educational psychologist, author, speaker, and coach. In her book, Building a Legacy of Love, Thriving in the Sandwich Generation, she shares her journey as a working mom caring for parents with dementia. Christy's a retired school psychologist, and now she's working to support caregiving families with a special focus on sandwich generation caregiving topics. She's one of the co-hosts of Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, a podcast by the AlzAuthors.com, and she was featured in Women's World magazine in January of this year, 2025. You can find the Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia podcast on all the major podcast platforms, as well as on the Whole Care Network. Their website is alzauthors.com, and you can connect with Christy at christyyates.com. Check the show notes for all the links. This is an amazing interview, almost an informationally overwhelming interview, but a very rich one on caregiving. Christy shared her caregiving experience. Both her parents, one with Alzheimer's and one with vascular dementia. She also had young children at the time, so she shared those challenges of being a sandwich caregiver. Towards the end of the interview, Christy talked about the 5 skills every caregiver should have. I called them survival skills. And she really provides some great nuggets of wisdom there for caregivers. So if you are a caregiver, or if you are an end-of-life worker caring for caregivers, this interview is for you. There's a lot to learn. Christy, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's going to be a great conversation. I'm going to start out with a question just to get to know you a little bit. It has nothing to do with caregiving, if you can believe that. Nothing to do with hospice or end-of-life planning, none of that. And it's very random. So here we go. Here's your question. If you could have any animal as a pet, what animal would you want to have?
Oh my gosh. I love animals so much. I really love big cats. So I would love to have, and that's so funny because I'm a dog person, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I just love the majesty of these big cats. But I'll tell you, I probably would never do that because I feel like it's cruel to have wild animals as pets.
Good point. Good point. So when you say big cat, which one would you want?
Oh my gosh. I think Bengal tigers are absolutely stunning. You know, they're so cool, you know, like they're colorful. I love to watch them in the wild, you know, films of them in the wild. They just look so cool.
They're
I love
beautiful.
them.
But Christy, just so you know, you only get one. You could only have one. It was when you said I love animals, I thought, she'll have to have boundaries on this.
I know.
Well, we are talking about all things caregiving today because we know that caregivers are part of an end-of-life team. They are the most crucial part, and they are the experts in their person, or in your case, your people, because we're talking about your parents today. Tell me about your caregiving experience with your parents, how it got started, how long it lasted. How did this roll for you?
Sure. Well, I did care for both my parents. They did not live with me, but we, my husband and I and my family, I had my kids were younger at that point. They're adults now, living on their own. But we started helping them out. We called it helping them out. We were helping them out maybe 2010, 2011. And right around 2012, we started to be more involved. At that point, we had more solid diagnoses about what was going on. And I managed their care. I was the power of attorney, their healthcare advocate, all of the things. And it really was a snowball, right? I think my parents lived up the road from me. I live in Sacramento. My parents lived up the road from me about 5 minutes. We were really close to them. They loved my kids adored them. They adored my kids. They actually loved my husband too. So it was perfect. Everything was great. My brother lives back in Michigan, and my sister was living close, about 2 hours away, and then relocated to Montana right around, early 2010s. And so it was me, five minutes away. And my dad had a stroke in his early 60s, and my mom had breast cancer in her early 60s. But they were really vital at this point. They retired when they were about mid-60s, and they retired from Ohio. They moved to California, and they were golfing every day. They were having a great time. They were my free babysitters. It was perfect. But then things started to happen. My dad had, as I said, he had a stroke, so he had been on blood thinners and a variety of other medications for hypertension and things like that. He wasn't necessarily he didn't look really unhealthy, but I know he was not a healthy man. So it's not a surprise to me that he was then diagnosed with vascular dementia, which for him manifested in just not being as sharp as he used to be. Really had a hard time with numbers, and he was just really sharp as my dad. You know, he was like the guy who could do, numbers in his head really quickly, and the stroke took a lot of that. That's kind of where it showed up for him that way. But and my mom had been a teacher, and she was healthy. She was pretty healthy, but yeah, we just saw signs, right? There were things like we had to go and help them with the television again. Maybe if they got a remote control wasn't working right or something, or they could not do cell phones or bill pay or things like that. And there were just little things. And so we would help a lot with those kinds of things. And I think what really was difficult for me is at the time I was working as a school psychologist, so doing a lot of cognitive assessments with kids and memory tests and all of this. So I was really aware of a lot of things that go into this whole memory stuff, but I was in complete denial about my mom. I thought she was just really anxious about my dad. People were calling me and saying, hey, your mom's forgetting things. I'm like, oh, she's just anxious about my dad.
Yeah. Overwhelmed.
She's overwhelmed. But I eventually was like, I got to look at this a little differently. And what really was the kicker was she was, quote unquote, helping him with his medication. So he had, yes, it was cringy because there was the medication box with the evening and morning meds in there, and they were all laid out. And I'd go over there and she had shuffled them around. And my dad was like, she's doing it again, Christy. And I mean, he was aware that it wasn't right. And I'm like putting sticky notes on things. Call Christy before you touch anything. This did not work. So I called a caregiving agency in our area that offered assessments for folks, and they came in, and there was a geriatric case manager and a geriatric nurse, and they did a full assessment. They interviewed each of my parents, walked through the house, and then talked to me. And I'm telling you, it was such an eye-opener. I can't recommend that kind of thing highly enough because I couldn't see it because I was too close. And the nurse said to me, my biggest fear is this medication thing. This is not going to work. We have to find something about this. But there were other things, little nicks on the car that my mother couldn't remember where those came from, or little dents, little things. And it just became obvious that they needed help. So they eventually moved into an assisted living, and then I was there. I was there a couple times a week, and we still involved them in our family stuff all the time. But that was kind of our journey, and it was a lot, but it was also, I think, a time that gave me a different kind of relationship with my parents, and I really had to challenge myself to show up a little differently with them. Not treating them like toddlers, right? That was a big one. Mm. So those were some of the things that occurred for me.
So, Christy, both your parents had dementia, living in the same household.
Right. My mother was then diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I didn't get to that. So, yeah. So my dad had vascular dementia. My mother had Alzheimer's. Really a lot on my plate.
Wow.
And I was raising kids at the same time. And I think that was another thing that when I was looking for help, for me, like, what do I do? How do I handle this? That was a tricky piece. So
yeah. That's what we call a sandwich caregiver, which is really the focus of the work that you do these days, is to educate and support sandwich caregivers. That's a powder keg situation. That's pretty stressful. There's a lot that goes into that. So basically you were caring for your own children and for your parents, not to equate your parents with children, right? Because we don't infantilize, that's ageism. We don't want to do that. But as caregivers, there's so much support that goes into that. It is a lot like rearing a child. And what they say about Alzheimer's and dementia's disease trajectory is it is a form or a pattern of aging backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's that whole, I think I read a term, or I came across a term once, retrogenesis. So big, fancy scientific term, basically means you lose the skills you most recently learned, right? So my parents never really entered the digital world, right?
Yeah. So no technology, huh?
Yeah. So, and that was a difficult thing. So some of those things were things I had to go in and help them with a lot. And then other things kind of they were not able to do. And so we helped out with all of those things. And at the same time, you're absolutely right. We don't want to infantilize our parents. Right. And yet it's easy to do, right? Because there were times when my dad was kind of acting like a little kid. He'd get upset about, but I had to keep reminding myself, this is my dad. He's still my father. I have to honor him. And I had to keep reaching deep inside myself for that.
Well, I mean, let's face it, we get impatient with our kids. We get irritated with them. We fuss at them. And really, having a parent with dementia and interacting with them is no different. And because my mom has dementia, and I would like to say that I don't get impatient with her and I don't fuss at her, and that I always understand where she's coming from and why she's doing the things she's doing. But in reality, it's difficult to keep that perspective and constantly remind yourself, it's probably the dementia. It's probably the dementia. Give them some slack. And depending on what the dynamics were in the relationship before, my mother has had a tendency for a very long time to fib to us to keep her privacy if she was doing things she didn't think we would approve of, my siblings and I. So now that we have to, you have to double check it through the system. Is this a dementia? Is this just her being a mess? Is she concealing something? A lot of different dynamics go into that. So let's talk about your parents towards the end of their lives, because they died in a very close time interval for you and your family.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to say we're recording this on a day that is actually their wedding anniversary. So they would have been married this year, 67 years. They were very close. And I will say this, my dad was in so much discomfort and pain the last few years of his life. He wasn't pleasant to be with at times. And I know he was very worried and nervous about my mom, and irritated with her too, because he was seeing what she was doing and it was having an impact on him. But they did really love each other very much. And at the end of their life, like I said, my dad was in a lot of pain and discomfort. And they died 7 weeks apart in 2015. And my dad fell out of bed in early April 2015, and he fractured his hip. And when he was in the hospital and I spoke with the surgeon, he was really clear with me. He said, Christy, your dad's 83, and he's not a healthy man. And I'm going to have you talk to the anesthesiologist, because even just going under for this surgery is going to be iffy for him. But there aren't a lot of alternatives, because otherwise he's just going to be living in a lot of pain. We have to put a pin in there and so on and so forth. But he said, I want you to be clear and understand that in my estimation, this is probably the last year of his life. This is how this happens. These fractures of this nature can really change the trajectory of someone's life. And that was really hard to hear, but I was grateful that he was being honest with me, right? So he said, it's not a for sure. It's not, this is it, but I just want you to understand what's happening. The anesthesiologist was willing to do it and felt like, he had a good chance of having this all be okay. And he did come out of the surgery all right. So that was April. And then my son graduated high school in May of that year. And was going to head off to college in August. So we took a family vacation. We had been planning this for a while, because it was his high school graduation, and we took a family trip. And it was the first time I ever bought travel insurance. I'll tell you, I never thought about doing that, but I bought travel insurance, and now I always buy it. But, I just thought, we've got to go. And I felt guilty, and yet it was an opportunity for my brother and sister to fly in and spend some time, more than just a couple days. And we needed a break after these many years of things getting more and more intense. So we did. And when we came back, I came back on a Sunday, and on the following Monday, my dad was in the hospital. And that's when the nurse started talking to me about next steps. And she called in a hospice social worker, or administrator, and we signed him up for hospice that night. And that was a Sunday night. That was a Monday night. And he passed away on the following Friday. So it was quick. It was quick. And it's interesting because, so that was Monday. And then on Thursday, I think I visited him several times during the week. And then I stopped by on a Thursday, and at the assisted living, they had him up out of his wheelchair, and he was walking, and he had a big smile on his face. And then the next day, they called me and said, I think you need to come over. And, he passed pretty quickly. He died pretty quickly, and he didn't seem to be in a lot of pain. So it wasn't a long process for him. I was so grateful for the people at the assisted living who were very helpful with me. I was so worried about my mom at that point. Like, what do I tell her? Does she know? Tried to keep her out of the room. That was the hardest part. And then my kids, this was hard for them. They came in and said goodbye, but they really didn't want to sit bedside watching their grandfather pass away. So they did come in and say goodbye and tell him they loved him, and they spent a lot of time with my mom, and then they went down to the Bay Area to see my in-laws and spend the weekend with them. And my husband and I just cared for my mom and my dad. We brought my mom home that night shortly after my dad actually passed away, and we kept her at our house for a while. And that was hard. And I didn't know enough what to say or do with my mom, and the people at the assisted living were helpful with that. The tricky part was my mom wasn't so far into her Alzheimer's that she didn't know. Like, if I had said, oh no, Dad's coming, he'll be here in a minute, she wouldn't have bought that for very long, because they lived in the same room. They were with each other 24 hours a day. She was aware enough to know there's something going on. So when she would ask, where's Charlie? I would pause, and then she'd say, oh, he died. And then she'd cry. So we just had to get through this time period. That was hard. And that was, so that was in July. And then my mother, she did okay. And then she ended up with something called pleural effusion. So one of her lungs was encased in fluid. The pleural lining between the lung and the lining was full of fluid, and it kind of showed up like pneumonia. She couldn't breathe well. So took her to the doctor, had some x-rays. I think I took her to the emergency department, and they admitted her. And the next morning they removed some of the fluid and examined it, and there were breast cancer cells all in the fluid. So, so I have no idea. I don't know. I didn't ask for any autopsies or anything, but we put her on hospice right away. And the tricky part about this, and I do write about this in the book, is that also was a Monday. It was a Sunday that I took her into the ED, and then Monday morning she had the procedure. Well, my husband and I were scheduled to fly from Sacramento to Ohio to take our son to college that Wednesday. So I was like, this is like the thing I never wanted to have happen, that I would have to choose between my parent and my child. Mm. I was just beside myself. And all of the feelings, right? Anger, resentment, frustration, grief beyond belief, and just so much. And I called everyone I knew, called my siblings, called my aunts and uncles, and every one of them said, you got to do what you want to do. We're behind you 100%. And I'll tell you, it was when I really sat down and sort of tried to channel my mother from 10 years ago. Like I imagined talking to her and saying, what should I do? And I knew without a doubt, I get a little choked up saying this, I knew without a doubt that she would say, you go with your son. I'll be here. Don't worry about it. So she's like, I knew she would say, you're a mother. You've got to go. You've got to go, And so I talked to the doctor and was reassured that we were not imminently looking at her dying in the next 3 days. So we went, and it was a precious time with our son. So I I came back and we had several weeks with her, and then she died on her birthday, September 12th, 2015. So it was a roller coaster year. It was something else. It was like loss and change and all this. And it hit us in different ways, And I think as a mother, I was very worried about my kids. They were so close to my mom and dad, but we talk about them all the time. I think they feel really honored to have been there with them at the ends of their lives. My daughter was there the night before my mom died. She died in her sleep. She was on hospice, but she died in her sleep. And that was tricky for me too, emotionally. I was like, man, I cared for you. I came here every day and you waited until you were asleep. I couldn't say goodbye. And I realized, you know what? It's not up to me. It's not up to me. But it's been something to explore.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. We're going to pause for just a minute. My guest has more to share.
When you need information about hospice for yourself or someone you care about, Hospice Navigation Services can help you navigate hospice care for the best end-of-life experience possible. If you're walking this journey and need the help of an experienced guide, Hospice Navigation Services is here for you. We understand the importance of having a guide who can provide personalized, unbiased support. Our team of experienced hospice navigators is here to offer one-on-one consulting sessions by phone or video. Whether you need information about how to start hospice services or guidance for your current services, we're here to listen and provide compassionate support every step of the way. You can book a 30-minute free navigation session with an experienced hospice navigator when you need general information to start your hospice experience. Book a 60-minute hospice navigation session when you have in-depth questions about hospice or need to troubleshoot your current hospice care. You deserve compassionate support and guidance for your end-of-life care. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. Visit theheartofhospice.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today. This episode of The Heart of Hospice is sponsored by GrandPad. If you're looking for an easy solution to stay connected to your older loved ones, GrandPad is everything you need. The GrandPad is the all-in-one tablet designed especially for senior adults. The GrandPad utilizes a simple format that allows seniors to enjoy games, music, email, and more. GrandPad comes with 4G LTE cellular service already included, so there's no need for Wi-Fi. Users can create a private family network that allows for secure photo and video sharing. No spam, no robocalls. Only connections with those you trust. With GrandPad, you get safe, simple video calling and photo sharing to connect the whole family. The GrandPad is a great gift for a senior loved one on Mother's Day or Father's Day. This simple device empowers seniors of all ages and technological skills to safely connect with family, friends, and caregivers. The GrandPad team strives to create a world where no senior is lonely or isolated. To learn more about the advantages of GrandPad, visit our special GrandPad website designed exclusively for the Heart of Hospice listeners at grandpad.net/THOH or call 1-888-904-4723. That's 1-888-904-4723.
Can we talk about your dad's hip fracture?
Sure.
So for my listeners that aren't familiar with this, when you take a person who has a neurodegenerative disease and you give them anesthesia, general anesthesia for a procedure like that, they often deteriorate and it come out immediately not the same mentally. The anesthesia doesn't clear from their bodies easily, and so they have a huge decline. In addition to the fact that they need physical therapy that they either don't understand or they can't cooperate with, it's really a huge choice. And I have seen people that chose not to have a hip fracture repaired because of that. And so
Sure.
there are immediate consequences of that choice as well, which include this person's now immobile and has pain. right? And becomes
Right.
total care. Did you agonize over that decision, or did it seem clear to you how to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I agonized. I don't know that I got that clear of information from the doctor. He didn't talk really about my dad's dementia in terms of the surgery. He was kind of looking at it more from a mechanical thing with the hip. What he impressed upon me was, because I said, well, then, maybe we shouldn't do this operation if you don't think, because I was worried about the anesthesia. Maybe we shouldn't do this.
Sure.
And he said, that's an option, but he would be in excruciating pain and he would be completely bedbound.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know. I mean, it really was a hard decision because it was, and at this point I was their healthcare advocate. I had to make some decisions. I'm asking my dad, but I don't know what I couldn't ask my mom. She really couldn't have that conversation with me.
Right.
Oh my gosh, it was really hard. And I just sort of kept trying to play the odds, which is a horrible position to be in.
Yeah, I mean, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. There's
Right.
not a great solution there.
Right.
And
yeah.
that's incredible pressure on a caregiver.
Yeah.
Because if you choose not to do the surgery, then you have immediately made them bedbound. So he couldn't live where he was going to live unless you provided 24-hour care inside there, which goes back to financial stuff.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just talk about a snowball. There's so much that goes into it. And the reason I bring that up is because falling and having a fractured hip are pretty common with
Right.
with these folks. Dementias, Alzheimer's diseases, their mobility becomes an issue at some point. So I think that's a conversation worth having to talk about that. I want to talk about your mother's response to your dad's death. The
Yeah.
fact that she really couldn't hold on to that reality. Do
Yeah.
you feel like it made your grief deeper to have to witness her sort of realizing this repeatedly?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt I was being cruel. I have learned so much more having now, after my parents passed away, and talking about things and learning more about grief and even learning more about Alzheimer's and dementia, working with ALS authors and different, I've taken different trainings and working with people. I don't know if I would do it differently. I probably would, but as I said, it was very hard for me to conceive of just that gentle fibbing that we think of now as being the kindest thing we can do sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. Because she was aware enough. She knew he wasn't there. She knew he wasn't right around the corner. They just were never separated. So he was her touchstone to the present at all times is what I look back and see. But you know what, Helen? I don't know that was really it. I think I might be telling myself that story because it makes me feel better, but I don't know. If I paused when she asked me, "Where's Charlie?" and I paused, she would say, "Oh, he's dead."
Yeah.
So there was somewhere in her that knew that. And I just hated that she had to keep remembering that. I didn't redirect her a lot. I would redirect after she got there. I would say, "Okay, Mom, we're going to do that." I'd find things to do. And she wasn't, I'm trying to remember. She still was able to go to meals, and I took some Family Medical Leave Act time, and I would sometimes go and have meals with her or be with her when she was having her meal at the assisted living where she was living. And, she was able to have a conversation with her table mates. All of them had some sort of, if they weren't already in memory care, they had a memory floor there. She wasn't on that yet, but everybody there had something going on. And she was able to still have a conversation. She still knew my name, my husband, my daughter. some of the staff. She wasn't unable to interact, right? But yeah, it was, and she still smiled and laughed about things. And my sister came to visit. My brother came to visit with my nephew. She remembered my brother and sister. And she didn't see them on a regular basis. She did remember my nephew, but she didn't remember his name. But she said, "I don't remember your name, but I remember that I love you." And that was another one that just got me. It just really touched me. I was like, God, that's so beautiful.
That is beautiful.
And yeah, she just knew that, So it was very hard. It definitely challenged me in my grief. I think it kind of postponed my ability to move through it, to be honest with you. As I said, my dad died in July. I think I went back to work the week after my dad died, and that was not a pleasant experience. And I don't think workplaces handle grief well. Managers by and large don't. It's not because they don't want to and they're not caring people. I don't think they have training in it. They don't have training in it. What do you do with somebody when you're a staff member, a member of your team leaves because due to someone's, and they come back? The grief isn't gone and
Right. 3 days.
3 days bereavement, right? Okay, we're all fixed.
Right.
So it was miserable. And I know there's some people who are doing some good work in that area, so that's great. But that was hard. So I kept everything was deferred. A lot of grief and a lot of emotional work was deferred till after my mother passed away.
Yeah. You stayed busy with your caregiving roles.
Yeah.
All of them.
All of them.
All of them. Until later. So what was your favorite part of being a caregiver for your dad and your mom?
I really did love being able to find ways to engage in happy activities with them. I liked that. It was great. It was fun when we could get together and we would have them over to our house for dinner. We'd pick them up, or we might go to church with them. They had been very active in a church in our area, and we would pick them up and all go together and then go have either breakfast or dinner, depending on what time we went. And those were good times. They were also hard times because they were times in some ways that I was taking away from other things I could have been doing. It was a lot of that's a tough thing because they weren't living with me, and that was their choice. I do want to say that one of the things that I learned from my parents, I'll tell you, that's one of the good things. I learned a lot from how my parents, the end of their lives, they had, before they retired, they formed a trust. They had end-of-life wishes all spelled out. They had saved their money and worked with a financial planner. So they had everything dialed in. So I didn't have that financial burden. They had purchased a long-term health care plan that only paid for nursing home or assisted living because they had had positive experiences with one of their, like my mother's father was in assisted living after his wife died, or my grandmother died, and then my grandmother was in after my dad's father died. So they'd had positive experiences with that. So I was handed this blueprint, like, okay, here's what you do. And that was a wake-up call to my husband and I, like, oh my gosh, we've got tweens and a teenager and a tweenager, and we don't have anything. We got to put ourselves to this task. And that was really informative for us. So I'm definitely on a mission to tell people to talk about these things early and often and take action. But so I feel like I got a huge gift from my parents with that. So watching how they put their lives together and what they did, that was a beautiful thing to see, how they cared for each other and how they cared for all of my brother, my sister, and I, and taking that burden off of us. But we did have happy times. We had a lot of, there were a lot of bittersweet moments too, though, Helen. I have to tell you, there were different things that my mom missed as she progressed in her disease, and that was hard. She stopped wanting to do things without my dad being there. I think she was afraid to leave him. So like going out to lunch with me or with me and my daughter or doing something, she didn't want to do that because she just, oh, no, I don't want to leave Charlie. So, I mean, there were different things that came up that were difficult. But she was delightful to people that came to visit her. It was super sweet. I think my dad was happier when people kind of came through. Otherwise, he was just really in pain and miserable a lot of the time.
Isolated.
Yeah, isolated. And the first place that they lived in, it was not my choice. That was the one they picked, and I did not like it. But that's where they wanted to go. And I'm telling you, I would come into their apartment and always the History Channel was on. It's like they were reliving World War II every day. That was their era. So that's what they were watching was, my dad had been in the military, not for long, but he went in after college and became a Navy pilot. And so he was just always interested in stuff, history, military history. So he'd watch the History Channel.
So, Christy, what are 5 survival skills that every caregiver needs to have?
I think the first one is acknowledging that you're a caregiver is the first step to take. I think that's one that a lot of people miss.
Admitting you have a problem is the first step.
Right. Exactly. I am powerless. I am a caregiver. You really do have to acknowledge and commit that I'm doing this, because I remember making that conscious choice. As I said, I was doing little things, and then suddenly it was like, nope, this is what I'm doing. So first is that acknowledgement and commitment, and the second thing is really building a team. Really lean into the people who can help you. If your parent, if you don't have the legal paperwork to be able to talk to your family members or your person's physician, if you can get that, because that person's part of your team now.
Yes.
And power of attorney over other things, financial. I leaned into those all the time, but I also leaned into my brother and sister weren't in proximity. But I had conversations with them about how I need you to trust me. Can you trust me? Here's what I need from you. And here's what I don't need from you. I'm going to do this, but I'm not interested in backseat drivers. So if you guys are good with this,
right,
you let me know what you want me to communicate, how you want me to communicate. I'll tell you everything. You want written documentation of everything I do? I'll do it. And they were like, no. But I also don't want you calling me the next day saying, yeah, what you did was wrong. I'm not interested, because I'm here on the ground. Yeah, I am boots on the ground here. Don't come up to me the next day and tell me you would have done something different. And they understood that. So I think, leaning into your team. So that's 1, 2, 3 is absolutely self-care. And I can't tell you that I did this well, because I didn't, but.
But you learned the hard way that you needed it.
Absolutely. So it is taking time, like not feeling guilty about taking time off, even though it's hard to let someone else care for your parents or your person when you're gone, respite or whatever, realize that they will get through that. And it's just like when your kids, and again, I don't want to equate your aging parents with your kids, but remember when you would leave and they would cry because they had a babysitter, and they'd be like, no.
Right.
And then you'd hear from the babysitter 5 minutes after you were gone, they were fine. And that's usually what happens. It maybe not, but they will survive without you for a weekend, and you need that time. So take it. So like I said, we took that vacation and I felt bad about it, but I look back and I'm like, nope, it was the best thing we did. So it was good. Yeah, absolutely. So self-care, taking time. And so self-care to me sometimes is learning your boundaries and being able to be firm with them and saying no when you need to say no. And so it's not always bubble baths and, massages.
Is it ever bubble baths?
It's never really bubble baths. But, a nice massage once in a while is really cool. But that's not really what I would say is self-care. I think it's those ways you take care of yourself. And it might be learning how to say no and set boundaries. I think 4, I would definitely say talking to people who have been through it. So finding support groups, finding connections with other people who are in a similar journey. And you're never going to find somebody who has the exact same circumstance, But just knowing you're not the only one going through something is really powerful.
Right.
It's really powerful. And I guess 5 would be being willing, and it's not going to happen right away, but being willing to see some of the gifts that are coming to you. And I don't mean monetary, but it could be more spiritual, like the gift of time, of connecting with somebody in a way you didn't before, that can be you can find really interesting things about somebody who maybe you didn't have a great relationship with, and now you have time with them. And I don't like to bright side things, when somebody says, oh, let's look on the bright side. I don't like to do that so much, but I also feel like we have to be open to the possibility that there's something in here for us. There's a lesson, there's a gift, and it may come to you much later, but there are probably things that you can take away from this time. Those would be my 5.
I love that. Those are good survival skills. Christy, where can my listeners find you and listen to your podcast, All's Authors?
Sure. All's Authors is spelled ALZAUTHORS.com. So alsauthors.com. You can go to that website. You can find tons, and you'll actually find our podcast is listed on there. Our podcast is on wherever you get your podcast, you'll find ours. And it's called Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia. And it's just a great resource if you're walking a dementia journey. You can find me at ChristyYates.com, and there are a million ways to spell Christy, and I have to spell it the right way, which is, I'm just kidding, but ChristyYates.com. So ChristyYates.com. I can't tell you how many times I get it spelled differently at Starbucks. It's so funny. Oh. But yeah.
I can imagine. I have links in the show notes to your website and to the podcast as well. It's a fantastic podcast. I've listened to it. It's helped me in my caregiving responsibilities with my mom. So you guys are doing some great work. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate what you're doing. I think people can learn a lot from you about hospice and palliative care, and it's really, really good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes, and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.